It sure is gonna be hard to be funny on this one. Fury is a heavy movie. Lots of weighty topics shown with a lot of reverence. It's just not very comedic. And it's gonna be hard for me to be too flippant about it. I'm going to try, but Jesus fuck. I would recommend not watching this if you're in a major depressive mood. Content warning. This video will contain references to violence, a lot of violence. It's a World War II film. There are some minor issues of consent. If those things are not something you want to talk about or hear about, I get it, and I would choose a different video. Thank you. This review, as always, will contain spoilers for the movie that I'm reviewing. If you don't like spoilers, watch the movie and come back. We introduce Brad Pitt as a hard-ass first sergeant. He runs a ragtag crew of hardened military men. We go through and introduce the Punisher, played by John Bernthal, Luis from the MCU, played by Michael Pena, and Stanley Yelnats, played by Shia, of course. There's another crew member who died in battle, and the Punisher is hot-wiring the tank and manages to eventually get everything up and running. They manage to get back to camp, and Brad Pitt turns out to be a highly respected member of leadership. He's even earned the name War Daddy. He steps away from his crew and finds a quiet place to let his guard down away from everyone else. The stress is obviously killing him. This is just obviously not going to be like Inglourious Bastards. This is not wish fulfillment. He goes around and gets new orders for his crew and a new crewmate, Norman, played by Logan Lerman. Percy Jackson, apparently. Norman is green as hell. He has never seen combat, never seen death, and now he's being thrust into this situation where that will be his entire goal. We cut to the crew traveling and start to establish a couple of the characters. Yelnats is a Christian who has put aside his religion to make sure that he does what needs to be done. He will not have premarital sex, but he will murder people that he feels needs to die.
Don't disappoint Christ now. Don't let them lead you straight.
You see, we can kill him, but we can't fuck him, because it says so in the Bible.
Weird flex, highly crusades of him, but okay. He also doesn't proselytize to the rest of the crew because it causes arguments.
Done trying to convert your heathens.
But he's willing to joke about it.
Boy, do you think Jesus loves Hitler?
I'd assume so. Hitler accepted Jesus in his heart, got baptized to be saved. I ain't gonna save him from man's justice.
The rest of the crew rib him playfully. As they travel, Norman spots a young man who fires a Panzerfaust at the tank ahead of them. A man goes full Thick Quan Duck and takes out a gun and ends himself. War Daddy berates Norman for not firing on the child that did this, and Norman is humiliated, and I'm turned on. We continue, and the crew gets into another firefight. Norman
Post out like a bitch!
But they are victorious, at least for the moment. They settle down for a little while, and some of the soldiers find a German soldier and bring him out. War Daddy takes Norman over and tells him to shoot the man. The German pleads for his life in his own tongue. Norman refuses, and War Daddy says that either he kills the soldier or he dies himself. And Norman says, "Alright, bet. Kill me," which is a big mood. War Daddy says to stop being a bitch and puts Norman in a headlock. Choke me, War Daddy. He puts a gun in his hand and forces Norman to pull the trigger. Norman is understandably traumatized by this and doesn't know what to do. War Daddy breaks away from the party and tries to collect himself. It's obvious that this is wearing heavily on him. They move on and make it to a town, getting into another firefight, and someone uses a tank to blast into the building. Two men stumble out on fire. Norman shoots them, mostly to put them out of their and his misery. War Daddy congratulates him on his first willing kills. Norm is obviously distressed by this and is silent for a long while. War Daddy notices a woman watching them from a building and takes Normie up with him to her building, only to discover two women who speak only German. He then offers them some food and they cook dinner. There's this obnoxious sense of dread throughout the scene, and you know something bad is going to happen. But I assure you, I was not smart enough to predict what actually does happen. Norman starts playing the piano, and the younger sister sings along. War Daddy tells her to take her into the back room and do the Devil's Tango. He does so and reads her palm, which must have been super confusing since she only seems to understand German. He kisses her, which also must have been confusing since she doesn't know what the fuck he's going on about. Time passes, and it's implied that they had sex, which has some huge ass consent issues attached to it. The rest of the crew find War Daddy and Norm and congratulate him on getting laid, then disgustingly proposition the nice German girl who seems to have become attached to Norman. They have dinner and it doesn't go over too well. There's a lot of tension and it's pretty uncomfortable.
The girl's egg.
The squirrel's egg.
That's the girl's egg.
Then where the fuck was my egg?
For you. Let me just fix this for you real quick.
And as much as you want to destroy it, you're not gonna fucking stop me. Neither will you.
Do you like horses? Don likes horses. In France, we hit the beach right after D-Day. And we had to fight through all these fucking hedgerows. Fucking pain in the ass, right? We finally hit open country. And we linked up with the British and the Canadians. And you know what we did? We trapped an entire crowd army. Pulling back into Germany. We fucked them up.
Yep.
There was dead crowds and horses, busted up tanks, and cars for miles.
They get word on their next mission and start to move out, but some long-range attack takes out the woman's building after they get outside. Norm freaks the fuck out because his new friend is very much dead. The Punisher grabs him and they wrestle a little, and the Punisher is kind of an ass about it, honestly. They continue on and get into another firefight, and Norm is now much less sympathetic to the Nazis, and shoots them all whenever he can. Killing his girlfriend has obviously radicalized him, which is good. Now he's a good tool of murder, just like the rest of them. All of the other tanks are destroyed in this battle, but War Daddy's crew manages to scrape by just barely. Fury, their tank, rides over a mine and strands them. The Punisher and Norm scout out an abandoned triage center, and Punny apologizes. War Daddy tells Norman to go scout ahead a little bit, and Norm discovers a large force of Nazis heading back their way. He informs the crew, and War Daddy decides that recreating 300 is a good idea, for some fucking reason. The crew all join him, and they disguise the tank as having been completely destroyed, and give Norm his official nickname.
I am the machine.
The Germans descend upon them, and they start whittling them down. They do pretty well for the record, managing to kill a lot of people, but eventually the opposition is overwhelming. Punisher takes a Panzerfaust to the gut and dies. Luis takes a shot and drops a grenade that he was going to throw, and then jumps on it to save everyone else. A fucking camping bullshit sniper kills Yelnats and wings War Daddy. Outgunned and out of ammo, the machine asks to surrender, but War Daddy says, "Nah fam, bad plan. They'll just make you watch The Village, and that's a fate worse than death." Norman hides under the tank and is found by a German soldier, but the soldier doesn't mention it, and the machine eventually goes into rest mode. only to be woken up by a horse shaking the mouse. He is rescued by some Americans, and the movie ends on him mournfully staring at Fury after another soldier calls him a hero.
Ideals are peaceful. History is violent.
So, this movie's a little dark. I think the theming is very strong, though. It's fascinating in some ways. This movie doesn't portray war in some idealized light. Actually, it takes it in much the opposite way. War Daddy and crew are really reticent to do all of this. To the point where, through a couple of small scenes, it's clear that War Daddy probably has PTSD and survivor's guilt. But he puts all of that to the side because he feels what he is doing is necessary. It's not about morality or the lack thereof. It is about defeating the enemy and nothing else. He even acknowledges, to one degree or another, the humanity of the people that they're killing. He doesn't want to do this, but he acknowledges that it has to be done. I can't speak to the historical accuracy of this movie. I don't know anything about tanks or guns or war. I'm just not that kind of guy. But I do acknowledge that even if this movie isn't perfectly accurate technically, it does have a certain amount of truthiness to it. It feels true. It feels like what soldiers might actually believe, for better or for worse. From my understanding, World War II, and all war really, was a hellish time where people fought, and on the ground level, it's less about some ideals than it was about surviving. A lot of these men were drafted and forced to serve their country, quite possibly against their will. There were some who undoubtedly volunteered, but the draft was where a lot of the soldiers came from, meaning that for a lot of people, this was just a job that they had to do. They had to murder people. They had to go out and see terrible things that would undoubtedly haunt them for the rest of their lives, which they were also aware could come crashing down on them at any moment. Hitler and the Axis powers had to be stopped. I agree with that much. But in a lot of war movies, they try to glorify the act of war itself, that this, and maybe most wars, are justified. This movie doesn't do that. It simply takes a group of people doing what they must. They're following orders, and they're good at what they do. But it's not necessarily noble. Contrast this with something like Captain America, the First Avenger, and the difference could not possibly become more stark. To Steve Rogers, there's no higher honor than to serve his country. It would not do to just have him stay home and not be a part of this grand battle. He does this because his heart is pure. But Fury takes a different look at all of this. War isn't noble. It also isn't ignoble. It's a-noble. It is something that has to be done. War Daddy does what he must because he has to, and because he's good at it. At one point, the Punisher says that Norman is too good for this crew.
I'm sorry, you know. I think you're a good man. That's what I think. I think maybe we ain't, but I think you are, see.
That he doesn't really fit in or mesh with them because his morals are too strong. That is an interesting idea. Everyone in the crew acknowledges that what they're doing isn't moral. Yelnats, who is called Bible in the movie, could be considered the moral core of the party, draws some interesting lines. When he is asked if Jesus loves Hitler, he responds,
Boy, do you think Jesus loves Hitler? I'd assume so. Hitler accepted Jesus in his heart, got baptized, he'd be saved. I ain't gonna save him from man's justice.
So there's apparently some kind of separation between what God does and what man does. In the movie's ethos, morality is the realm of God, and whatever is left over just needs to be done to minimize the harm. And to pretend that this doesn't need to be done is seen as a weakness in the movie. We see this in War Daddy several times. He eventually remarks that
Ideals are peaceful. History is violent.
I interpret this to mean that it is easy to keep one's ideals as an abstract, but when pressed on it, violence is sometimes necessary. And thus, with the paradox of tolerance, I can see how that is true to one extent or another. Occasionally, in order to maintain peace, we must do some terrible things. Violence is required at some points to maintain peace. People like Richard Spencer, a man who wants to create a white ethno-state, something that cannot be done without murder and the disenfranchise of anyone who does not fall into line with what Spencer thinks of as white, a nebulous concept at best, needs to have people stand up to him. And that sometimes requires violence. Unlike the movie, I insist that this is a moral and ethical imperative to stand up for the disenfranchised, to stand up for people of color and our trans brothers and sisters, those in between and those without gender, the LGBTQ community, and anyone else. I'm not much of a fighter myself, but I will try with what few skills I have. Much like in the movie, we cannot rely on a god or gods to do it. So, we're all that we have. Peace as an ideal has to occasionally be maintained with violence. So yeah, that's a heavy movie, and some heavy concepts. Very fun. There were a couple of other themes that I could have talked about. There's a lot of memento mori in the movie, which makes sense. Truckloads of the dead being carted around. Death is abound in the landscape of the movie, and it's just the reality that they have to live in. Most of them don't flinch when they see someone die. It's just what is, and they do what they have to continue. And while this seems to be harming them, seen clearly by War Daddy breaking down in private, they all just, well, soldier on. A lot of the themes are so intertwined that I can't really talk about one without the others, which is why the ideal section ties directly into the duty and necessity versus the morality and religion. The color in this movie is well used. It's pretty desaturated, but still less so than the Snyder cut somehow. But it sets the tone really well. I dig it. All of these actors do a really good job. Pitt stands out because, well, the movie is centered around him, but everyone else does a good job as well. Everyone is a multifaceted character, which obviously have a unique inner world. This is now probably my favorite Ayer film. Low bar, but sure. Hey, there's another video down. We're just pumping them out, I guess. So I'm working on Descent and Hereditary, and we'll probably do a movie in between those. I don't know which one is going to come up next, but we'll find out. I know I have a lot of people eager for those, but again, I don't want to just be the superhero or horror movie guy. There's such a wide breadth of movies out there, and if I want to be typecast, I would just lean further into being Fat Thor. But if there's a movie that you want someone to cover, I'm available. Throw it down there in the comments, and I'll probably get around to it. While you're down there, why not try another one of my videos? The Crimson Peak review is a lot more lighthearted than this one. The Village one is goofy because it's a silly movie. The Joker one is kinda bad, but hey, we gotta start somewhere, right? Anyway, do all of the YouTube stuff, please. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Or don't. I'm not your dad. Unless you want to be. I could be your war daddy. And you, my little war pet. That's weird, but I'd do it for you. Just for you, viewer. I love you. This is Sean, your personal war daddy, signing off.